Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. I'm working for TripAdvisor and I was previously working for Amazon AWS, and prior to that I worked for a couple of different startups, and I have been applying agile practices for over 7 years, and here to tell about my agile experience, my agile journey. So we will have a short agenda today. We will have an introduction. I don't know even if it's an introduction, but we will see. And we will then see some of the drawbacks of the current agile frameworks. And we will briefly touch base on Agile Manifesto. And I will then talk about an alternative, and we will summarize what we thought. So a few years ago, I have attended a course to get a Scrum Master grade, and I became the Scrum Master. And it wasn't a big deal. I was already the Scrum Master for my team. So I moved on. In time, my Agile experience changed a lot. And I felt like I didn't like it anymore, and I wanted to change it. And I wanted to apply simpler approaches, simpler ideas. So this actually circulated back to the agile frameworks I was trying to apply, and then I thought, like, maybe that's not right. Maybe there is something wrong about them. And I started to evaluate them as well, and at that point I was abandoning all of them almost. So before going into detail, this is the Google Trends graph where you can see the dominant agile framework Scrum and versus Scrum versus Agile. In the left-hand side you can see the worldwide trends, and on the right-hand side you can see the German trends. So as you can see, there is a close relationship between Agile and Scrum. So we can probably say Scrum is the dominant framework. Although I believe there are a ton of different ways to apply Agile principles, this is the dominant one. And the relationship is even closer for Germany. So people like Scrum in Germany more. So before again going into detail, I would like to have a section where I want to present main tweets about agile frameworks or agile software development. I actually got inspired from the American TV host Jimmy Kimmel, where he has celebrities reading mean tweets about themselves. So we will read mean tweets about agile frameworks. So here we are. So apparently the Scrum thing is so great, you need a person on every team dedicated to forcing the others to do it. This is true. Man tells me he's taking a course on Agile, learning about product owner and Scrum Master and Scrum. I ask what they said about Manifesto. Nothing yet, but I am only halfway through. That's the sad thing. I got one of those courses, like a couple of different ones. There was nothing about Agile Manifesto. That's the source. Like, how can you actually skip that? So, the transformation was a failure. We got over 100 teams doing Scrum, but none of them doing Agile. Key point. So, we are doing Scrum, we are maybe doing Kanban, whatever, but we are not doing Agile. We are maybe even applying old waterfall stuff with those brand new Agile frameworks, but we are not doing Agile. We just call it Agile. So, and then before going into coming into this presentation, I just wanted to get some understanding from my friends. So I created a survey and sent them across my friends and some of the developer channels. Although the results doesn't have any statistical value, I still believe there is an opinion that we can use. So here are the survey results. So which methodologies do you use? And again, as you can see, I mean, it's 2018 and we are still seeing 20% of waterfall. I mean, maybe they are actually like keeping track of the, I don't know, some COBOL code for a bank and for 40 years and they can change it the way they are doing this. And for, and almost 80% agile software development, some 20% of people doing something else. I don't know what it is, but they're claiming it's not agile, not waterfall. I'm fine with that. So I then asked, how do you rate your agile experience? And I mean, maybe, and the results I got was 3.5 out of 5. I mean, maybe I'm a little bit generous, but when I like something, I generally go for 5, 4. And so maybe there are some stuff that are actually wrong with the agile frameworks. And lastly, last question is, would it be fine to use just Agile Manifesto? And I got answer for almost 60% of the people said it's fine, but still we're using Agile frameworks. So, and this gives an impression that Agile frameworks have some downsides. So let's actually see some of the downsides for the Agile frameworks. And I will start with the terminology. I guess you will be all familiar with the this third terminology. So stand-ups. Oftentimes you might realize you go to a stand-up and you got bored. Why? Because the person who is speaking, isn't something doesn't interest you, because like you're not interested in his project. But when somebody when you are interested in somebody else's project, then you actually know the status of that project. So you don't need to listen to him again. So there is actually no goal here. Like you don't gain anything by listening to those people. I don't mean to don't listen to anyone, but the problem is for the projects you are interested in, you already know the status. For the projects you are not interested in, you don't care. So that is me. Estimates. So how do you even define an estimate? Like some says it's hours, some says it's days, some says it is complexity, some says some different other measurement type. I don't know. But what I know is it's just controversial. Like nobody can say anything about the pure definition of the estimate. Like, I mean, if I am a business owner, I just care about when I will deliver the product, and it should be in days. But for other person, the meaning might be different. And the sad thing about estimates is you don't actually build the same feature twice, which means you are actually tackling a problem all new. So since you don't tackle the same problem twice, you don't have an experience. So it's impossible to actually guess. And even if you actually create that feature again, since you uncovered the unknowns for that feature, you will be faster. So you will again fail for the estimation if you go by that. So planning. This actually goes with the stand-up. So I've seen teams where 10 people were at the table and they were trying to apply Scrum and they were planning for each task. But the problem is, maybe for that big team, you would have a ton of different projects. And again, you come to the same point. I mean, if I'm working on a completely different project, why you are actually estimating my project? Like, what's the value on that? So the next thing is retrospective. I mean, this is probably just me, but I just find retrospective completely boring. When it's not boring, I feel like, I mean, something has went wrong, and people starts to blame each other, and it's like it becomes, from time to time it becomes a hostile environment because something failed and nobody wants to face it. And velocity. velocity is the remaining, the way we estimate how we actually are we on track. And the problem with the estimates, they again based on the problem with velocity, they again based on estimates. Since you can't be sure for estimates, velocity might not actually give you anything. The second thing is some organization actually thinks that delivering value is equal to velocity, but it's not. Delivering value is making your customer happy. You might have a very great velocity, but you might not actually give any usable feature for the customer. And so burn down. I think the fanciest thing here is burn down, because you have those lovely charts, you finish some of the work, you're proud of yourself. But I mean, what's the value for the actually for the developers or customers? If I'm a customer, I just care about the feature. I don't care about the remaining work. And the remaining work, again, based on the estimates, are actually not guessable, right? So maybe it's completely untrue. So all of these items in the list, all of the terminology can be abused. And I've seen a couple of times those terminology being abused as well. Some would argue that, like, when things are abused, it is completely about organization. But why don't we think about the frameworks as well? Like, I mean, maybe they have some little part in it. Maybe they create those problems as well. So, so here's our problems then. So, frameworks hinder developers' contribution to the product. What I mean, you have a role which is called product owner. And I mean, from definition, he or she owns the product. So, and I see sometimes developer can't contribute back to the product just because like they're shy about it. And remember, some of the very good products are engineer-driven products as well. So maybe we're losing engineer contribution back to the product. And I think this is one of the worst part of these things. Kills the innovation. I mean, people always asking more and more from the developers, and there is no time left for innovation. I mean, if you have like 1 or 2 days of, I don't know, well, like whatever you can think of, you can do a side project, and with that side project, maybe you can actually build something very useful for the company. Maybe it will be a differentiating feature for the future of the company. But since you're time boxing everything, it's not possible. The second thing about the time boxing is it creates a technical debt. So it's not just one task. So you're assigned one task, but you need to do it in 2 days, and you do that task in 2 days. But the problem is, maybe at that very point you needed a refactor, and since you didn't do the refactor, you have a problem. And one task after another, after another, you have a huge technical debt. And how do you pay the debt? You can't pay it because it's too big. You blame everything. It's actual management technique, like the frameworks. If you think about it, they are, like most of the managers will do those metrics just because like they will see information about the developers whenever they want. They can micromanage as well. I mean, I'm speaking of micromanaging in a I guess negative way, but so you can actually use those frameworks against developers himself or herself. It seems every engineer works the same way. So you estimate, and for let's say for 2 days, and maybe you're a new person in the team. Maybe you're not experienced for that sort of technology. Imagine yourself, like you don't know anything about AWS S3, and your task is to download a couple of files from AWS S3 to local file system. If you don't know, what happens? You struggle. You get stressful just because the level of effort for that task is 2 days, but it is 2 days for maybe your teammates, but it's not for you because you don't know AWS. You need to learn AWS first to get that done. And it creates bureaucracy. Like by bureaucracy means, I mean, you create for anything, you create a task, you put it to sprint backlog. From sprint backlog, you evaluate, and you decide you don't want to do that. And for next sprint, yeah, we don't want to do that. And I saw some teams even go further. For changing of a label on a button, they would require you to create a ticket. Nice. So you might not realize, but Agile frameworks actually brings a ton of complexity. You might not realize just because you actually know it. When you know it, you don't see the complexity behind it. So on one hand, you have Scrum Masters, product owners, facilitators, and more. And on the other hand, you have new processes and new principles based on the and maybe rituals. So, and even if you think if it is not so complex, why do we even have so many courses and trainings on also for all sorts of agile frameworks? I mean, if they are not complex, then we would be simply understand them, right? Because they are complex, we have a ton of offerings on courses and trainings. This circles back to the product owners. I sometimes see product owners decide everything because of the relationship between you, developer, and the product. So when you don't love your product, if it's not your baby, then it's no longer like you. If you don't feel that attribution to your product, then it doesn't feel good, and you're less likely to do a great job. I think all of those problems, between all of those problems, this is the most critical one. Agile frameworks doesn't deal with dependencies. They assume there is no dependency. And you depend a lot. You depend on the office. You depend on the DBAs. You depend on security ops. You depend on a ton of different things. You depend on another feature developed by another team who doesn't apply any kind of agile frameworks. They don't care. But still, you need to release the feature in time, but you have a dependency. Rejects catastrophe. What it means? I mean, everything was fine, everything was lovely, and in the middle of the night, at 3 a.m., you got a page. And what happens? You lose the next 2 days. And how do you explain that? How do you log it? How do you tell we lost just 3 days dealing with this catastrophe? So this is a little bit controversial, but I think it only works in theory. The problem with that, we measure agile frameworks with their measurement. Like you measure how good you are doing with velocity, but velocity comes from the framework itself. I mean, the only measurement you can take into account is the delivering value, and even delivering value, you should ask to customer. And also, I don't see any clear benefit for a good team. Like, I mean, if everybody is responsible, everybody is doing their job, and you're frequently releasing software, I don't see any benefit. Like, if I have a problem, then I can talk to my friend, colleague. So this brings us to Agile Manifesto. The good thing about Agile Manifesto is this: it's brief, and most of the time we forget about how brief it is, how good it is. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So the single most important thing in software development are individuals. If you don't have good team, good developers, you don't produce anything. If you have the best tools for Agile framework, best processes, it doesn't matter. I can produce a piece of software without any process or any tools with great software developers. Working software over compressing documentation. This is a little bit old. I know because like when the Agile Manifesto came in, the waterfall was the de facto standard, but it's not it doesn't apply that much. We changed the way we are thinking, and we are thinking working software is better than anything else. Customer collaboration. I mean, you need to talk to your customers. Let's say your customer has a feature request, which is very complex, and it will take you 2 weeks to implement that feature, right? So, and maybe it is not that important from your customer's perspective. If you don't go to your customer and talk and identify that it is not that important, you will lose 2 weeks. And they will probably use your feature once or twice a year. So customer collaboration is important. I guess this responding to changes everywhere, like it's not just software development probably. It just, everything can change. Your customers can change, your colleagues can change. I don't know, the way you develop the software, the language you develop, everything can change. So the best thing is to just realize everything can change. You can't actually follow a plan. So the highest priority for us to satisfy the customer. We give a feature and we look at the customer if they like the feature or not. If they don't like, we get the feedback, we work on it. The best way to see the result is to deliver software frequently. If you deliver software frequently, your customers will get a chance to test, try your feature all the time. And the teams should reflect on how to become effective. Let's say you have an application which was installed in one data center, and somehow the data center got fired, and you're out of internet. Your application died. So what you need to do is to come together with your colleagues and decide what to do. Maybe the next thing for you to do is to make the application multi-data center application instead of one. So you just need to constantly evaluate yourself how to become effective. So whatever you're applying, it should be simple. It shouldn't be, there shouldn't be, I think there shouldn't be any books written on that. Like, I mean, what I mean is, it shouldn't be so complex that you can understand, just like Agile Manifesto. Like, these are the, I'm just showing 5 principles of Agile Manifesto. There are 12 of them, and it is done. When you read it, that's it. There's no more. No more. I believe self-organizing teams. I mean, when maybe management chain has 10 people, but the team should actually decide on themselves. Like maybe 2-3 people comes together and create their own squad or whatever you call it. So this brings us to minimum viable agile. So obviously the concept is coming from the minimum viable product. What does it mean? I mean, different people say different things about what it means, but what I mean is, it means that we will stick to Agile Manifesto, and we will refer to it while doing software development. So it means less ceremonies, there is no meeting if you don't need it. And strictly apply those practices. The more DevOps, the better. Focus on delivering value. It means that we will constantly check ourselves if we are actually giving, if we are providing our customer anything valuable. Small teams. I love small teams. I love one-man projects. They have a focus. And even if the project is big, I believe you can have a ton of smaller teams with a great focus, and then they can deliver value better just because they won't have much distraction from the others, because it's easier to work with. And nowadays you see like the microservices. This is the way it is, right? So you have an interface for one microservice talking to another, and you have 2-3 people building one microservice, and that's it. So when you have a small team, because you have less people, there is less overhead. So how to apply? this is nothing new. I think for minimum viable agile, you just need to have something like sprint task board. What you need to do is just probably, it's just simple, stupid. You have something to do, doing, and done. That's it. If you wanted to, this is per release, right? So this is per milestone. I don't care about the sprint. This is per release. And for the release, what I mean is we will release 5 features, let's say, or 4 features, whatever you decide on. But you will do, at the end of this release, customer will have those values. So how do you apply, how do you find out the priority for the task? So you have, let's say, 3 customers, customer 1, customer 2, customer 3, with the priorities. How do you define the priorities? It depends on yourself. Maybe you're making 90 million from customer 3 because, and it's just valuable because you make more money. And for example, the task 1 takes 2 days and task 2 takes 3 days. So what we do is for task 1 and task 2, we just get number of priorities from the customers and divide by the days. For task 2, we again divide by days, and we see the priority for task 2 is 30, and for the task 1 is 2.5. How to apply DevOps? So DevOps is not really just for a team. The more you apply DevOps throughout the organization, the better it gets, right? So, and the first thing is first, you need to have a deployable software all the time. Nowadays, I can think of any frameworks or any language can be deployed in a 1 day. You can probably have something deployed in a day frame. And the thing is, we have some great software like Jenkins and GitHub. You can have an automated pipeline. Although it is sad, we still have a ton of software without tests. I mean, tests are great. Tests are, it speaks for itself, but I still see people skipping tests. So we should apply tests all the time. So automate as much as possible. I mean, you would have a DBA, you would have a security operations. If you can make a DBA as a service, then you can consume this service. So automate that piece. If you can make security as a service, maybe like if you do certificate authentication and you make the certification part a service, then you will actually you can actually have that as a service as well. So you will automate that process. So create patterns for reuse. It means that when you have a ton of little teams, you will probably solve the same problem multiple times. In order to avoid them, you need to like have happy hours, whatever you call it, and you will actually learn what the problems they are solving. And when something is common, then you make a side project. And from side project, maybe you can open source the project and contribute back to the developer community. So let's remind us, agile frameworks might fail to impress us just because they're probably forgetting about Agile Manifesto. Maybe they became something else in time. Maybe the intent was actually cool, but nowadays we are using it differently. Maybe the problem isn't really the frameworks, but the way we use them. So the sad thing is we often forget about Agile Manifesto. This is like forgetting about Agile altogether. So MVA is just my alternative solution. You can probably come up with your own solution as well. It's just the way I see it. It's just Agile with less overhead. And thanks for listening. Any questions? Yeah. thing is, one, these frameworks are a little bit complex.
Can you repeat the question because?
Oh, sorry. Our friend was asking why the agile frameworks are failing, or what's the problem with them to actually they fail. So the way I see is they're complex. So it's hard to get them working. And if you actually just Google right now, you will see a ton of articles how not to fail, because there are a ton of failure cases. And this is interesting. So if it is open to failure too much, then I think maybe it's not working. So, and the second thing is, so organizations grow to interesting phases, and when they grow, they probably have a well-defined process. When they wanted to create that well-defined process, they probably forget about core values, right? So maybe it's not about the framework, maybe but the core values versus the framework. So they probably forget some of the values of the framework and they apply it wrongly. But again, I see the frameworks themselves are complex, so that creates maybe these problems. Yeah.
Two questions.
Mm-hmm.
The first is concerns. You said you prefer small teams.
Yeah.
And small tasks or projects.
Mm-hmm.
So who's responsible for the integration of those parts?
Good question.
Someone has to do it. And the second one is concerns the Agile Manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
You sound like you should only do the things on the left part, but leave the parts on the right because they are not important. After a little problem with it, is this what you meant?
No, I mean, it's just we will, as just in the Agile Manifesto, we will value the left over right, right? So, but I probably value more than you would value, maybe. That might be the reason why. So the first question was, yeah. So the first question was, who does the integration when you have a ton of small teams? So when you have a ton of small teams, you would have, I guess, the way I see this, the product grows organically. Like you have a very small product and it generates some value, and since it generates some value, you want to add some more people to help that it generates more value. So at this time, when the project started, somebody is actually kind of leading that project. Somebody has a vision for that project. So what I mean by that, for all of those projects, somebody has a greater vision. For those people, when they come together, they can actually interact with the other teams. And also, I also value autonomous problem solving. What I mean by that, like you have two microservices in this case, developed by one of them one person and the other one with 3 person, and maybe you're consuming that project, right? You just go to talk to them and ask what the problem is and how they can solve your problem. So still you would have some leads, I will say, for each project, and most of the time you would communicate through lists for the project, because for engineering you have different levels of understanding, and for different levels of understanding you have different responsibilities. So you can probably lean towards the ones who are responsible. For the second question, again, our friend asked if I don't value the ones on the right hand side. I value them, but I guess I value the left hand side more than I would value the right hand side. Any more questions?
Then I will ask. So first of all, thanks a lot for this different perspective from the Agile and Scrum. against the trend. It feels to me personally that your alternative of simplified agile MBA would work really better on the startups where you have smaller teams and there is not so much things going on. But what about the big companies?
I was able to apply for TripAdvisor and Amazon, so it. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I was able to apply it.
And then the question is, how does it work? Because then you have a lot of smaller teams, then you have like the same problems as microservices, you have a lot of different entities, and you need to have a huge framework to organize.
So the way I would say, our friend is asking, how do you handle the the MBA seems to be more applicable to startups, but I believe it's still applicable for greater organizations as well. Just because when you have very small teams, they can actually focus on very small problems. So let's say you have a problem with the database. You need a database service, whatever we call it. And you can simply have a database service that can actually just work on that problem and create a service out of that. And for the rest of the organization, they will consume that service. For example, you have, I don't know, some JavaScript framework, let's say, in the company. So there are people who, let's say, 2 or 3 people focused on that simple thing. And they produce the components for you, and you just use it. So what I mean is, every single team depends on each other. And you build the whole product. But with that, you still need a general vision. That's why we have managers. And the way they should actually give the vision to what to do. So, any more questions? I guess there's not. Thank you.